Programs, Outreach, and Youth Services Manager here at Monterey County Free Libraries. Thank you for joining me this evening for another episode of Book Chat. Tonight I'm going to be chatting with you about The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. This was my first time reading any of her novels. I had heard a lot about her, of course, and I was very interested to read this one. It got a lot of good reviews, it was getting a lot of hype, and I was very interested to read it. One thing that I did know about the author already is that she is a Native American author. She's a member of the Turtle Mountain Band of the Chippewa, and is the author of many novels as well as volumes of poetry. So she's very prolific. And her novels feature Native American characters, and that's an area that I'm very interested in. I like to read work by Native authors featuring Native characters. So this book was a kind of a journey for me. It took me a little bit of time to read because there's a lot packed into it, and I wanted to really digest what was going on in the text. So I'm going to read you the inside flap summary and then talk about some of the things that surprised me that were in the book that weren't addressed on the flap. So here is the summary from inside. The sentence asks what we owe to the living, to the dead, to the reader, and to the book. A small independent bookstore in Minneapolis is haunted from November 2019 to November 2020 by the store's most annoying customer. Flora dies on All Souls Day, but she simply won't leave the store. Tookie, who has landed a job selling books after years of incarceration that she survived by reading with murderous attention, must solve the mystery of this haunting while at the same time trying to understand all that occurs in Minneapolis during a year of grief, astonishment, isolation, and furious reckoning. The sentence begins on All Souls Day 2019 and ends on All Souls Day 2020. Its mystery and proliferating ghost stories during this 1 year propel a narrative as rich, emotional, and profound as anything Louise Erdrich has ever written. So even though it says the time period right there in the flap, I wasn't really thinking about all that really happened during November 2019 to November 2020. Of course, it covers the start and the height of the pandemic, the murder of George Floyd, and all the protests that were going around the country, especially, in Minneapolis and in that area. And so in a weird way, I was surprised by that, which is kind of funny given that it's very clear that there's that time period there. And when I read this book at the start of this year of 2022, I don't know if I was really ready to dive into a pandemic narrative just yet. So having all of the stress and trauma that the characters go through with COVID was very intense, and I think that's why I took some breaks while I was reading it, because it was a lot to remember going through all of that. And so that was something that it's funny, like now reading the inside summary and seeing it so clearly laid out the year, that it didn't really occur to me what was probably going to be going on in the book. I think it's also really interesting to note that the author owns an independent bookstore in that area, and so it was interesting to think about what in her life maybe influenced some of the action of this story, of her experience of running and working in an independent bookstore during the pandemic and during a time when it was really hard for businesses in general, but especially small businesses. So that's really interesting. And I, if you know from watching my other book chats, really enjoy reading ghost stories, horror, thrillers. So I think that's like what I latched onto in the summary, but this book is so much more than that, and the way that it looks at ghosts is not so much like, spooky horror movie ghosts. It's like the hauntings from our past, and so that's a different layer of ghost story. And what I also really liked is that you'll find, if you read this book, that the title itself refers to different meanings of what a sentence is. So, there could be a sentence in a book, but also what's informing a lot of this narrative is the main character's incarceration period. So that is a sentence, right? Your sentence when you're convicted of a crime. They also refer to the sentence that groups of people face in history from, having a Native author. There's a lot of talk about the genocide of Native people in America, and it's just, there's a lot of different layers woven into this book. So it is a really complex narrative that has a lot of different meanings that you could take with it and a lot of different ways that you could go. So like I said, it did take me a little bit to get through, but and left me thinking about it long after I was done reading it. So I would recommend this book. It's called The Sentence. It is in our collection. And if you have any books that you would like to recommend, please let us know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.